Good evening, everybody. Welcome back for another edition of Reasonable Doubt, brought to you by the Harris County Criminal Lawyers Association. I'm your host, Jimmy Ardoin, and back in action is my co-host, Julio Vela. It feels like forever, man.
I know. Why?
Well, because, let's see, you were off.
I was
the last show we had.
I was off. I was in the trenches.
You took that one off. We had a week off before that show.
Yeah.
And then we had an unexpected week off last week.
That's right.
So it's been like 3 weeks since I've seen you.
As Steven Tyler would say, I'm back in the saddle again.
Well, you know.
I would say, I'm back in the saddle again.
I missed you, man.
Hey, you know, it's good to be back. And next week we're off. We got the banquet.
That's right.
Go to the banquet.
Those of you who are lawyers.
Yeah, right.
Can get into the banquet. So we'll be here with you for the next hour, Julio and I. We had some guests lined up. They had to unfortunately cancel at the last minute on us, but that's okay. Happens all the time. So we'll deal with it. It'll just be Julio and I chatting here for the next hour. We'll have some good topics to discuss. You can get in on the conversation, 713-807-1794. And you know what? We'll just open up the phone lines. Like if anybody wants to get in, you got a topic you want us to talk about, we're not going to wait. Just call in. Also hit us up on Twitter at HCCLA_TV. And we can take questions, comments, any subjects you want us to discuss. We'll take them right here on the air. So, dude, I want to talk about one thing. You weren't here on the last show. We kind of brought it up with Judge Fields and Judge Jordan, and because it happened that day, actually, was that one of our public defenders got punched by his client in the jail docket. So it's not the first time that something like that has happened, but it is the first time it's happened under this post-Harvey conditions, or at least the first time that we're aware of. I mean, maybe somebody has had it happen to him and just didn't report it, but it's the first time we've had it happen to our knowledge post-Harvey, and everybody kind of saw this train wreck coming, so to speak. The way that the jail docket has to be set up, you've got everybody crowded in these small rooms, you don't have enough security, you've got people who are in jail charged on very serious crimes, a lot of times being told very bad news by their lawyers. It's just not a good situation at all. And, what you saw, what were your thoughts?
Well, I agree. It's like a pressure cooker down there. And it's not the fact that these people are innocent until proven guilty. It's not the fact that we're representing them in this process. The problem is how these individuals are housed, how these individuals are going through the actual court system. They're brought into and crammed into a small room. We're talking what looked like 40 or 50 individuals in a room with lawyers trying to stand over them and have a meaningful conversation about their case. It's hot. There's not enough guards. There's tensions are hot. And it's just waiting for something like this to happen. It took a jailer getting bit for there to be some sort of movement, even though lawyers were getting punched, even though defense lawyers had been saying this is about to happen and this is about to go off. Something needs to happen.
And we're in this position because, following Harvey, the criminal courthouse got wiped out. Mm-hmm. And typically, if you were in custody, you would be brought over to the courthouse, put in a holdover cell, and you would meet with your lawyers there behind the glass. There was a lot of complaints about that setup, that it wasn't ideal either. Obviously, because you've got just basically a big holding tank with, plexiglass between you and your client. You're shouting through a little cutout in the glass. But now, since we don't have that, the civil courthouse doesn't have holdover cells, and they've deemed it a security risk to take people who are in custody over to the civil courthouse because the sheriff's office doesn't think that they can adequately secure the civil courthouse. So instead, they've come up with this crazy idea that we're going to turn the jail library into a makeshift courthouse to have court for those people who haven't bonded out or did not get bond.
In a underground basement jail where the only viewership to the public is through a mobile video. It's just ripe for problems.
Yeah.
But then what are you going to do? What else can you do?
Well, and I don't know. I don't know what else you can do. I mean, I hear we're going to possibly get some of the courts back online here in 90 days or something like that at the courthouse. I mean, I don't believe it. We'll see it if it actually comes to fruition. But I think they're saying court floors 17 through 20 or something like that might temporarily reopen to allow and to alleviate this process. I mean, again, we'll see what actually happens if that plan comes to fruition. But there really is I don't think there is an ideal way to communicate with your clients about this stuff around the courthouse.
Right.
I mean, even if they're out on bond, and you're in the courtroom itself or out in the hallway, or in one of those little rooms, that's not an ideal setting. So the whole system's kind of screwed up, so to speak, in terms of how we are forced to communicate with people, or the majority of lawyers are forced to communicate with people. I mean, I try to avoid that situation. I just say, look, come to my office.
Yeah, right. And I think that's the most appropriate.
And obviously with a jail client, you can't do that.
Right.
But
you could say, I'll go see you in your cell, or in the holdover
in the individual meetup, meeting place that we have. But it's kind of hard. I mean, part of the docket is you can relay offers and possibly resolve the case that day, but if you can't, and you're giving potentially bad news to somebody in a situation where we could have happen what happened the other day on a number of different levels and different occasions.
There was a Facebook post by somebody a lawyer who routinely practices in the jail.
Yeah.
And when this occurred, and somebody replied to the post, and it happened to be a former inmate. And the individual said, it's so bad down there, they wake you up at like 4 in the morning or 3:30 in the morning, you miss your breakfast, you're brought out, you're waiting around for 2 or 3 hours, then you get taken to like an intermediary cell where you're waiting to get called out by your lawyer. Before you know it, you've already missed lunch. And then you're taking another, and so you've missed 2 meals, and the tension by the time you're done seeing your lawyer, which could be 12, 1, 2, 3 o'clock, and it's been 12 hours, that the individuals down there in custody don't even want to share good news. Like, it's just, let alone bad news, because the tension's so palpable that at any moment, anybody could pop off.
We got somebody calling in right now. Somebody wants to jump in on our conversation. I encourage everybody else to do the same. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Yeah, hey guys, Justin.
Hey man.
So I had a unique situation. I can't get into it too much, but the misdemeanor, there's like 2 or 3 jail dockets. There's a misdemeanor jail docket, and there's 2 different felony jail dockets, one for men and one for women, right?
Correct.
So when inmates go to court, when we were in the old criminal courthouse, didn't the deputies do a pretty good job, or try to do as much of a good job as they could, of making sure that they weren't bringing like co-gang members over at the same time? They were going to be in the same holdover in the back. Didn't they have a check system for that?
I don't.
Yes, yes, and I think they're supposed to still be doing that. Has your experience differed?
Well, remember when I saw you in there?
Yes, it was my guy. It was.
I'm not saying anything. I'm not saying anything about anything. But my question: don't you think that the misdemeanor jail docket could be a situation where potentially you got
rival gangs on each other?
And you got a woman who comes in, and it turns out she looks across the room, and sitting at one of the tables across from another attorney is her pimp.
Ooh, is that me?
And is there anything in there right now that keeps the? Because the way I see it, when we go over there, there's just a sheet where we just fill out our client's last name, first name, what court they're from, our name, and then they just radio over and get them brought out of a big room. Do they really know who they're mixing?
I don't think so. Obviously not.
Well, I mean, have you seen? Well, I
Well,
don't- I
apparently
don't
this
think
happened.
I
Apparently,
don't know what I can say that that's what I've seen, but I'm just saying. I mean,
You're just
what
posing
I've
the
seen-
theory out there that could it happen.
Well, I mean, I think it's possible for it to happen. I mean,
Yeah.
my only point with this whole comment is that I think it's all those concerns that have been laid out continuously on y'all's show are real, and now they're starting to happen. But there's another concern I don't think it hasn't been talked about too much either, and there are some inmates who need to be protected from other inmates. And I think that the system that they had before, while it was flawed, we never thought we'd be praying for a time to go back into the criminal justice center in Harris County, but we can't wait for it to open back up. But I don't know if the system they have right now has the proper checks and balances to also make sure that inmates are being held safe. I think that's another concern.
Yeah, I mean, it's a litany of concerns. And wasn't the guy charged today, officially?
I think so. But do you know do you know what the charge was?
Assault of a public servant.
It was
right?
public servant.
I think so.
Do you know, Justin?
On the guard or on Danny?
On the well, both.
I don't know. I don't know about either, but I was like, wow, if our clients assault us and we get to be called a public servant.
Well,
You know-
I think it's
Well, you know,
part of what your employment status is.
If I'm gonna be called public servant, I'm gonna need access to those VIP elevators on when the CJC reopens. All right, look right here.
Dude, it ain't reopening for at least 3 months.
90 days is what they say.
90 days.
I say 2021.
I say 2021. I think that's fair. I can't wait to see those elevators on the outsides. It's gonna be looking like, you know.
It's gonna be look like when they put the ramps on the outside of the Astrodome.
Yeah, you know.
When they added the
I think they're going to probably just eventually they're going to announce that they're going to have hovering elevators that just float, free floating on the outside. I mean, they're just coming up with such ludicrous things right now that don't make that. That's probably going to be the next thing. Is it's just going to the elevators aren't going to be attached to the building, guys. They're going to have jetpacks on them, just go up and down.
Maybe so.
Well-
I got an idea. Maybe you should come on the show sometime, Justin, after your
Well,
debut the other
hey, you
day.
guys did a great job. So I'll let you guys get back to it. Have a good night.
All right, thanks for calling in. Yeah, I don't know that there's. Look, they got to figure this thing out because it's only going to get worse.
I agree.
And there's no good solution to it right now. I mean, you've got a courthouse that's not going to be functioning for another 3 years. I don't think this temporary thing's gonna work. The family courthouse where they're holding the misdemeanor cases, I mean, that's a joke.
There's mold there.
I know.
There's mold.
And I heard something they were talking about shutting it down.
Well, we know. Remember, they have an escape plan.
Yeah.
You have to jump off the second floor
Right.
on the San Jacinto and Franklin corner. They'll have large trampoline stuff. Yeah. So second floor. In the event there's a fire, you have to jump off that floor.
Crazy. Hey man, what do you think about this this Cohen, Trump, Giuliani thing?
You know.
Can you believe all this crap?
No.
Can you believe this is the state we're in?
Look,
I mean,
Of course he paid the money back.
First they raid the lawyer's office. Then, it comes out today. They're making all these crazy statements. I mean, Giuliani basically admits his client lied, and which is not a good look. And now it comes out today that there may be wiretaps of Cohen.
So wiretaps, can the government just, okay, the answer is no. The government can't just put a wiretap on somebody.
Yeah, they got to go get a search warrant for it.
Based on what and how?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, they would have had to make an application to a magistrate and show that there was a viable reason to do this.
And they have to run it up the chain on their end too.
Well, yeah, they would have had to run it. Again, the same checks and balances they had to raid the lawyer's office in the first place are going to apply to the process getting internal approval at DOJ before they make an application to get a Title III wiretap on a lawyer's office or whatever. It could be a personal cell phone. My guess is that he probably, because I read stuff that said Trump has been using his personal cell phone against, of course, Secret Service and everybody's wishes. I mean, what if he called Cohen from his personal cell phone to Cohen's personal cell phone?
Well, it'll be there.
Probably.
Well,
but that's what I wonder if they. And by the way, did you see they see 16 cell phones from Cohen? When they raided his office, he had 16 cell phones.
You know, I remember. Have you seen that episode of either Better Call Saul or what's the one Heisenberg, Breaking Bad?
Yeah.
Where Better Call Saul has like 16 cell phones in his
It's like the new age equivalent. Remember the opening scene in the first Back to the Future with all the clocks?
Yeah.
Instead, he has all the phones.
Yeah. That's amazing.
16 phones. What do you do with that?
So, do we know that? Is there a duration that a wiretap can last? Are you aware of any?
Well, yeah. I mean, you get it for a certain period of time, and they have to go re-extend the duration of the warrant. But you know, and so that's the thing. We don't know how long. There's just now this rumor out there or a leak, potentially. Don't know whether it's an actual leak of genuine information or if it's just a rumor that somebody's trying to start.
They're saying the leak came from the White House.
And who knows? I mean, we're in just crazy land right now on this whole thing.
Wouldn't that be, what happened to attorney-client privilege? I mean, what's that about? Is it dead? I mean, now the government's tapping lawyers' phones?
Well, and you know, so that's the crazy thing. I've got a couple cases right now where we've got these, what they call filter teams, or as you may have heard them called, the taint
team?
Which is just like, that's the worst name. Like, I don't
terrible.
If I was a government attorney or FBI agent, the last thing I want to be on is the taint team.
Jimmy Ardoin, taint here.
Yeah.
Taint.
I mean, get me off the taint team as quickly as possible. I mean, no, that's just. But, so I've got actually two cases with this going on right now where I like to call them the filter team instead of
right.
the taint team.
Yeah, right.
They're supposed to be filtering stuff. But yeah, I mean, you're laughing at that.
Well, can you
Filter
imagine?
is so much better than taint.
Can you imagine the boardroom or that's in, okay, we have a new division or a new group here.
Yeah.
The taint team. How are you not supposed to laugh on that?
And you know, it probably started as a joke by somebody. Yeah. You know, we came up with this and said, "You're the guy. We're going to make you part of the taint team."
No, you're not. Yes, you are.
There's no alcohol involved in the naming of that team. But so what they do basically is it can start out with an agent first reviewing if they've got an issue where they get a bunch of stuff pursuant to a search warrant, say emails or documents from a law office. They have to have a team before the trial team, before the team that's actually handling the case, the prosecutor or prosecutors who are handling the case, or the case agent, before they can look at certain things, they might say, this needs to be looked at and scrubbed for any potential privileged material. Now the problem you get into is a lot of these guys only look for attorney-client privilege.
Right.
Okay? Well, there's all sorts of other things. If there's different things going on, you could have a work product privilege. Mm-hmm. If there's like in this case, I mean, there's civil litigation going on, right?
Right.
There's multiple civil lawsuits. What potentially could be work product privilege that someone could assert based on that? Mm-hmm. Then you have, you know, if it's communications between husband and wife, you have spousal privileges that apply. I mean, there's a number of different privileges, but the government tends to focus only on the attorney-client privilege. But the other thing that they seem to want to rush to, and what everybody is kind of wanting to do, is they want to bust that with the crime fraud exception, right? They want to say that they want to find any way that they can to turn it over and say, well, the crime fraud exception applies, that the defendant engaged with his lawyer, and I assume in this case what they're going to try and say is that Trump and Cohen both engaged in and agreed to commit a crime, you know, and thus the crime fraud exception applies. Now, the flip side of that is they could try to say another way they can pierce the attorney-client privilege is to say that the defendant used the attorney unwittingly, that the attorney was not knowing in the process that he was being used by the defendant for purposes of a crime.
Right.
And so he was using the attorney as cover. And so possibly then you could pierce the attorney-client privilege in that way to say that the defendant was using the attorney unknowingly as a means to commit a crime.
It's the classic.
Yeah.
Lowering your tax liability is legal. Tax evasion is not.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And so during this, so they raid his office, they take all these documents, and now there might be wiretaps. Let's put the wiretaps on the side for a second.
Sure.
I'd imagine that Trump's team is now litigating in court over eyes not being on those documents.
Right. So what happens is the filter team, because I
Right.
don't want to use the word taint.
Right.
The filter team will produce to the defense a list of the documents, whether it's emails or memorandums or whatever kind of documents they have, and they will say, they'll give them a log and say, here's what the communication is, a brief description of it. Here's why we think the privilege doesn't apply, or we agree that the privilege, does apply. In fact. So, and that's where you can get into a fight. And obviously, before it's given to the trial prosecutors or the trial prosecutors team, the defense and the filter team would go to the court to get a ruling on it. Ultimately, whether the crime fraud exception applies or does not apply.
Are we to assume that this filter team isn't then sitting around having drinks or Chinese takeout with the trial team after hours saying, oh, well, you're going to love what's in
that's
number
always,
351?
That's always a great question, right? So because the trial team is, of course, going to be the ones to tell the filter team what the case is about,
right,
and give them kind of their biased view
right,
of what we think the evidence is in this case and kind of what, wink, wink, nod, nod, what we're looking for. And so this is a huge controversy right now because because most of these filter teams are within the same office.
Right. I mean,
so why is it's an inherent conflict of interest. They should at a minimum bring in somebody from an outside office, somebody that's not a coworker. To do this scrubbing of the documents. I mean,
as you're playing baseball with your kids over the weekend,
right?
I mean, or a beer ever at the Sunday barbecue, or at church, or at a function,
or just the fact you might office next to the person.
Yeah, right.
Or that person might be your supervisor.
Yeah.
I mean, so it is a conflict of interest, and it's one that needs to be sorted out. And a lot of circuits. So for those that are unfamiliar with how the federal system's set up, you have the district courts at the lower level, then you have the circuits, which are the appellate courts, and then of course you have the Supreme Court. And so Texas, along with Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Mississippi, and Arkansas, are in what's called the Fifth Circuit. And so the Fifth Circuit has not really ruled on, and I'm sorry, I don't think Oklahoma is not in. It's Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi that are in the Fifth Circuit. And so did I say Arkansas too?
Maybe.
I'm crazy. I've been up for too long today. Been up since 4 a.m., so it's been a long day. But anyway, so there have been other appellate courts that have frowned upon this practice, and in some cases ruled, hey, you got to go get an outside team to look at this. The Fifth Circuit hasn't ruled on it yet.
It seems pretty obvious. You got the Fox Garden, the hen house. You got the I don't know.
Right.
All of them sitting around, all the chickens looking together. I don't know. I just made that one up. But whatever, right? I mean, you have that. That's a problem. That's why we have. That's why we have barriers. That's why we have due process. So you challenge these. So now they have. Wiretaps.
Yeah. Maybe.
They say. That it's from the White House or the leaks from the White House somewhere, and they can't confirm or deny that these are the actual. I'm talking about the questions. Wasn't there a list of questions that were submitted to Trump?
That's a separate issue.
Right, that's something else. Yeah.
That's something else. We can talk about that too. If you
those were leaked also.
Yeah.
And they're.
Well, so they leaked the questions that I guess Mueller wanted to ask him, or the list.
Right.
Is that what it was?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see the questions?
I think one of them was.
I haven't seen them. So
or do you know of any interaction with you and your campaign, not limited to, but including so and so with the Russians? Something like that. Yeah, I mean they're.
This is regardless of your politics, whether you're a Republican, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're a socialist, we can talk about that too, whether you're, a libertarian, this is kind of some interesting yet kind of also scary stuff here. I mean, you got the President of the United States potentially being targeted in a wiretap on his personal lawyer.
I am not a crook.
Yeah, I mean, you can say we live in weird times. Like we were talking about it before the show. I mean, I'm sure everybody in the early '70s was like, "What the hell's going on?
What is going on?"
And here we are again in 2018 with kind of the same thing. But I think this is a different issue. I mean, this is a much more. I feel like this is a much more the investigation itself is much more politicized.
Do you think
And
Giuliani?
of course, I wasn't alive for Watergate, so I had to read about it in history books. But from what I've read and comparing it to what we're going through now, I feel like this is a more politicized investigation than Watergate was.
Do you think that Giuliani realizes, hey, the jig is up, and that's why he was like, of course he paid that money? Or you think he was just? There's no way Giuliani was that. That dumb for doing that. I mean, they can't possibly. I mean, this guy's can't. Is he just that old now? Respectfully,
Well, that's
I mean,
the
is that
thing.
the problem?
What is he doing? Why is he saying this stuff?
That's what I'm saying. He can't. He has to be. He's up to. He has to be smarter than that. So maybe it's like.
Maybe that's the ruse on all of us. Like maybe they're sitting there going, "Ha ha, we got him. We'll do this."
You think all of this press affects in elections all the way down to the local level? I mean, you got movements like the Democratic Socialists that are coming out. Franklin Bynum's running, and he was all over the New York Times and as a Democratic Socialist.
Right. So here's what I think. I mean, I think this shows just the whole thing. Just shows the disorganization of both parties. I mean, both parties are so disorganized right now. I mean, think about it. If both parties were organized, Trump would have never gotten the Republican nomination, and a guy like Franklin Bynum would have never gotten the Democratic nomination to run for a bench in Harris County. I mean, they are so disorganized right now. They neither party knows where they want to go.
Is it?
It's just we're going to fight.
It's American politics imploding
we're
on
fight
itself.
and hate on the other side.
Well, and from the collapse rises new ideas. Like, for example, Democrat Socialists. I mean, then you have Dan Simons on the other end saying, "How are you even saying that word in a contested election?" It's going to be one of the big races to watch, I think. I'm not convinced that the Dems have this won.
I agree.
I'm not convinced. There's a lot, and I don't think the Republicans really cared about. They did, but I don't think they were really too concerned about primaries.
Well, I mean, look, I think you had a lot of people. You had a lot of people show up for the Democrats in the primaries. So clearly, there's a lot more motivation on their side, right? Question is, how many of those people that showed up on their side were people that came over from the Republican side?
Right.
I don't think anybody really knows. I think a lot of people are speculating, and a lot of people want to believe, but I don't think anybody really knows for sure. And I'm with you, man. I don't know. I don't think you can guarantee that there's going to be a Democratic sweep in November, as a lot of people are predicting.
People are going to have to come out and vote.
Yeah.
It's going to have to. They're going to have to come out. I mean, on either way. I mean, I think it's going to be. I don't think everything's up for grabs.
I mean, look. I think what could potentially have an impact is if something happens at the national level with the special counsel investigation.
Going back to it, you think so?
Yes. I mean, look. If they come out and there's a report that says the president obstructed justice or the president lied, I don't see how that doesn't sway voters.
Well, they say that the Trump, there's a story on NPR, they call them the Trump supporters. The Trump voted. Those guys, those individuals are gonna stick.
Well, but that's just with any party. That there's that crew within the Democrats, there's that crew within the Republicans. I mean, that's what kills me about politics is both sides always they play to their base, right? And it's gotten worse as we've gone along. It's like, why are you playing to your base? You've got those people.
Yeah.
Those people aren't ever going to vote for the other side. Whatever you do, they're not going to vote for those people. So they're entrenched. You don't have to play to them. So why not come to the middle? Because the middle is where everybody is. That's where you're going to pick up votes.
There's an interesting movement that's going on, and they call them the California Republicans. Have you heard of them?
These are the people who want to break away?
Yeah, right. And
Split California into like 4 separate states.
well, these are the people. I don't know. These are the people that are climate change and Republicans, like believe in science but also God, kind of like that dual thing, and they're making headway because they want to take the Republican Party back from where it's gone, but with new ideas and common ground, like climate change. They think we can do climate change and still make money, and not give anything to the poor. I'm joking, but that's what they're saying.
So, but what happens, you think, if, for instance, we had the great show that you weren't able to be a part of, with.
I was fighting the case, man.
I know.
I was fighting.
I know. Use whatever excuse you want. You weren't here, all right?
It's true.
And we had one Republican judge and one Democrat judge, and everything was fine. The world did not collapse, and there was an exchange of ideas and common ground that's been found,
Yep.
And a lot of people will say, I guarantee you, there's going to be some people who will say, well, it's just because they're both African American judges and they found common ground because of that. And that is the people who will say the cynical view, But I mean, we had them both on here, and you guys can go watch the video. I mean, they both come from 2 very different backgrounds. You can't just paint people with one big broad brush because they're the same ethnicity. And,
I agree.
And I think it was a very telling show that we had, that Judge Fields, here's a guy who's been on the bench for 2 decades, and a guy like Judge Jordan comes along and is able to change some of the modes of thinking. I mean. So there is that hope, but I mean, what do you think legitimately happens if we have what if we don't have a sweep either way?
Right. Another round of animosity, another good little round of good TV stories, tabloids.
What
fake
if
news.
half the criminal benches go Republican, half the benches go Democrat?
You know who suffers? The people, because then they're not gonna be able to get along, and they're gonna run their own little fiefdoms and factioned out, and we're gonna have.
Well, and the biggest problem right now is we don't have a freaking courthouse.
I agree.
And so how are we going to agree on a common set of policies going forward of what we need to do that's in the best interest of everybody?
I have heard that there's some felony judges that don't even go to the jail docket, that have never been there, are just not going to go there. I mean, how is that? And so, some other judge has to come and cover by their own good graces, but they still got to run back and take care of their own business. I mean, I don't know how long this. I mean, no other choice, I suppose.
It's just it's the problem with politicizing the judiciary.
Yep.
Is that we now have the ability where people potentially do not want to compromise on things just because the other side wants it.
Yep.
And what's this today? I read about something about the e-filing system is changing. Do you know what's going on here?
I've missed.
Or they're implementing something new policies and procedures with it.
I've missed the last 2 CLEs, and so I'm flying. Like.
Count on you, man. You don't show up for the show. I count on you to go out there. I figured if you're not there, if you're not here with us, at least you're going out and gathering information to come back. Add some legitimacy to this show.
I was working on the jury charge, man. I was working on the jury charge. I think there's.
Did you e-file it?
See, no, I almost did, but I didn't. But that begs this question. The clerks, if it's not the way the clerks want it, they reject it. But what if you got a deadline, you need a stamp, 5 o'clock today?
I think they count the
attempt?
The attempt.
Oh, I hope
Yeah.
so.
No, they do.
Whew. Well, not that I waited to the last minute for anything. I'm just saying.
They do.
If I thought to myself, if I needed this done today, this would be terrible. Because it takes me 3 days to file anything.
Right.
It's terrible. It's terrible, but I'm getting there.
Can't one of your kids file for you?
My kids, yes.
You need to
My
train one of
eldest,
them.
yes.
Come on, man.
I think my eldest one can do it with the facial recognition.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Nice. We got another call coming in. Hello, thanks for calling Reasonable Doubt.
Hey, yeah, it's Justin again.
Hey, man.
Man, don't you just want to come on the show?
Nah, yeah, but listen, Jimmy or JV, don't let Jimmy give you too much grief about that, because now that Jimmy's on the board of HCCLA, he'll be up on every single thing, and he'll ask anybody else for that.
And it's all for free. Because we love this. I love this organization. I'd be nothing. I owe a lot to this.
Taking on more volunteer opportunities.
Yes, you stick
look,
to
I was just struck by something y'all were saying. You know, you were talking about what happens if a bunch of Democrats and a bunch of Republicans win, and it's going to shut down. And am I wrong, or is the law what the judges are supposed to be guided by? And does the law change from court to court?
Well, it's not the law, and that's not what I'm referring. I'm not talking about how the law is ruled. I'm talking about how day to day we're functioning. I mean, we're trying to get some agreements on how e-filing is going to go, or paperless courts and all of this, and I would hope that everybody can be adults and set aside politics to help advance the system overall, and not just sit there and say, well, we're not going to do this because that's what the Democrats want, or that's not what we're not going to do this because that's what the Republicans want, kind of thing. When it might be an idea that's actually pretty good for the whole of everyone.
Well, and I understand that, but don't, like, e-filing decisions and things like that, those are governed by the Supreme Court, and the district clerk is required to implement those at the direction of the Supreme Court.
Right.
And
well,
so
the e-filing,
I understand some of the things.
I'm talking about this whole notion of, how plea papers are done and kind of stuff within, this whole idea that we're trying to move to completely paperless courts. That sort of thing.
There is a committee for that, Jimmy.
Right.
So you can probably feel a whole lot better now.
Well,
I nominate Jimmy to be the head to now take on the role of how to
Isn't Joe
e-file.
Venus on that, or Damon?
We're gonna put Jimmy's first order of business.
David will happily let you take that over.
I'm not taking that from him. He can keep that all day long. He can keep that all day long.
I just think the point is that y'all are right, that there's too much inconsistency between these courts, and there's some things that you can't do. You can't make somebody go to the jail docket, like JD was referring to, the few judges who just outrightly refuse to go. But the way that our system is supposed to work, checks and balances are built into it more than just in between the branches of the government. And that's why, there should be some things that judges don't have discretion and control over. We're always going to have judges, some waive appearances, some won't waive appearances, and that creates its own problems. But I think that in a lot of ways what we've seen is that there's just kind of a lack of leadership. No one is stepping up and saying what Jimmy is saying, which is, hey, this may be a good idea or a bad idea, but let's put aside who it's coming from and just focus on the idea. And that's what's been really disappointing, not on the immediate aftermath of Harvey, at least for me. There was a lot of leadership, a lot of good decisive decisions were being made, courts were being closed, dockets were being rearranged, appearances were being waived. But now that we're away from that, now everybody's settled back into, just doing things the way that they want to do them for no reason or logic behind them.
Right.
And I think it comes down to a lack of people being true leaders and doing what is making tough decisions and just falling back on political things.
Right. They're beholden to the leaders of the party.
Right.
We're starting to see, I'm trying to think of like Rick Court. I think Brock Thomas, did he run as a Republican when he ran? I know Guiney's doing Star Court. So you're seeing a drug court. So you're seeing these Republican judges doing things that some may be considered handouts or accommodating individuals or Democrats.
You're talking about accommodating the defendants, or are you talking about the judges who
no,
the voters
social
of Harris
programs,
County State?
Social
You're
programs.
talking about the voters of Harris County have said, we don't want you to be a judge anymore, and then the commissioners go ahead and make them a judge.
Well, I think I wasn't going that right. I was just saying I think they're embracing those. Like Guiney's embracing, doing a great job. Judge Guiney, Judge Brock Thomas is running that Rick Court, in my opinion, phenomenally. But they're social justice courts, social programs courts that aren't
or they're not the traditional.
Not the
tough
traditional, right?
Not the traditional tough on crime.
Right.
Courts that
I get that, and I
Republican
don't
Party
have
has
much
been.
experience with Star Court with Judge Guinea, but I don't know. I mean, the senses I've gotten when I've been in RIC Court before, which RIC is RIC, it's Reintegration Court, is there's nobody being reintegrated. Most people are not getting probations or deferreds. Most people are getting the shortest prison sentences and lots of 1244As if they can, but they're all walking out of there with more felony convictions that are going to make reintegration into any society more difficult. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like sometimes it's like what you said earlier. If you have a bunch of Republicans running those kind of programs, it kind of becomes the foxes running the chicken house, right?
Well, I've had a completely different experience, and I think it's a good inquiry. It's a good query. Maybe if we, I wonder if maybe Fair Court Watch, if they've looked at some,
I don't know.
These nonprofits have looked at how these courts are operating or not. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I mean, I think the problem you've got right now is you've really got a split in both parties, and neither party really has a direction or has any leadership, in my opinion, right now. And I think you see that down here at the local level, as well as at the national level. And you've got some judges, look at what happened to Judge Carahan. Judge Carahan was not doing things the way maybe most Republican judges, and certainly not the way the party leaders wanted him to do things, but he was doing things that other Republicans, some especially on the national level, believed are completely appropriate to be doing. And he got penalized for it. And he lost, he lost his bench. And I think, you have the same split over at the Democrat side. You have this group who wants to take it all the way to the left, and will burn down bridges if they have to in order to get that done. And so I just think, the time has probably come for a third party.
You think so?
Yeah, I do.
And a fourth. I'm still here. And a fourth party. And
you are still
party,
here. I was waiting for you to come join us at the table.
Yeah, wait. You got a chair. What do you mean 4, 5, 6? You think that'll happen? That's no.
We don't just need one more, because then we give us a few more years and we'll have a problem with the three parties. I would love to see a proportional representation systems across the entire United States that would make not just third party, fourth party, and fifth parties relevant. That would be a much better way to govern a country that's as diverse and broad as ours. We had more of a proportional representation in Congress.
Now you're just having crazy talk, man.
Yeah, well, I'm glad I'm not on there, because I was going to go off on a little tangent about the difference between Republicans and Democrats, the way I see it, to explain some of the divisiveness right now and why we have bad decisions that are knee-jerk reactions, like Judge Carahan being forced out of office for someone who, that race is the one to watch, but it's not going to go the way the Republican Party wants it to go, I feel like.
You think the Democratic Socialists are going to take the bench?
As of May 3rd, 2018, if I had to pick a candidate, and I answered a poll yesterday, if I had to pick a decision today, it would be for the Democratic candidate in that court. I'm not saying my decision won't change between now and November, but if I had to put money on somebody today, it would be a Democrat running in just about any race. But like you guys very astutely said, things could very easily change in the next 6 months.
I don't even know that it's changed. I mean,
well, Franklin and Dan, we both invite you on the show. We're doing it publicly now.
Well, I mean, that's the thing.
Yeah.
That is probably the one race where the two candidates are the furthest apart in terms of ideology.
It goes.
Do y'all think we'll be able to get both of them on at the same time?
Probably not. Not unless we have a cage match.
Yeah, or gloves. We could say.
I think both those men, Dan Simons and Franklin Bynum, are both smart. They're both educated. I don't think any of us disagree with that. And I think that they both strongly believe they believe strongly what they believe.
I want a cage match.
That's ridiculous.
I think we should have a studio audience, and they could go like, "Ooh."
We do. We have an audience. They're all behind the cameras, and they call in.
Make it happen.
I don't know. I think that they should be absolutely come on and talk. I mean, that'd be one of the greatest ideological discussions. It doesn't need to be a debate. It doesn't need to be an argument, but just a discussion between these two to show these what you guys are seem to be characterizing as kind of polar opposites on the political spectrum.
There was
how else would you characterize them?
I don't know. I don't know Dan well enough to be able to put him on the spectrum, but I would agree that Franklin's pretty far left, and Dan.
Well, Dan has to be pretty far right in order to have gotten the slate for the Republican Party over Kerry.
I agree. That's what I'm saying. He positions himself as far right. I don't know Dan well enough to know to speak to that. But yeah, I mean, I would say that they're pretty far apart on the political spectrum wherever they actually end up falling.
I mean, I would venture to say one's in Antarctica and one's at the Arctic Circle. I mean, that's how far apart I think they are on things.
You know,
so they're both in cold places. Okay.
I was listening to a story on NPR, and it said it was one of these that America is a fake democracy now. It's like it's not even doesn't even.
It never was a democracy.
Right. Well, representative democracy or
it's a republic.
Republic. But
yeah.
they were saying it's a fake. The United States is governed by the top 1%, and all of us live in this fake reality.
But that's the thing. I mean, we're the purveyors of democracy around the world. We don't even have a freaking democracy here.
It's true. It's true. It's republic,
so
right?
How can we be the defenders of democracy when we don't even have a freaking democracy?
Well,
and because we should be careful with what we wish for, because the founders, when they created our republic, they were right to worry about the tyranny of the majority that democracies can impose. And so pure democracy can be tyrannical. And so that's why our system is truly as perfect as it can be, even if we're imperfect in the way we describe it. But it's a Republican democracy.
This would be just so much better if you were on the actual show.
Yeah, we could see you and talk to you. Hey, so
I'm a face for radio.
So you got any trials or what, man? You've been kicking butt?
Oh, we're busy. We're getting way more dismissals than we're getting trials.
I agree. So
I appreciate.
So let's talk about that at the courthouse. What's happening now is the backlog. I think almost every misdemeanor court except for one, their dockets have now reached well over 1,000 cases per court, except for one court, and I believe that might be Court 1. And it may be one or two, but apparently the caseload has exploded. And so what's happening now is all these cases that shouldn't be getting set for trial, they're literally getting set because the prosecutors or defense attorneys, they're out of rope, and it's like, look, we don't have an agreement, and we're out of resets, so I guess we got to set it for trial. And you go to the bench.
I've been experiencing that. Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
it's not the prosecutor doesn't want to set it for trial. My client is lukewarm about it. I always want to go to trial.
Well, they're not ready.
And the judge is telling us it's trial date or plea, and we don't have a plea bargain.
Or
they finally get around to offering and I've had conversations with chief prosecutors about this. I've said, look, we may end up getting a trial date just so that my client can have enough time to complete the community service and the class that you guys are offering to dismiss the case. And then the prosecutor and I, we're both worried that when we get around to approaching to get the case dismissed, that the judge is going to go, wait, no, this one's set for trial. I'm not going to dismiss a case that's set for trial.
That's on a trial docket, yeah.
And then we're like, well, we didn't really want the trial date. You made us set it for trial. So I agree, it's a mess. And it goes back to what I feel like I said when I was on the show one of the last times. I was talking to another attorney about this before. There was a big, major shift in the DA's office among their personnel this week. I think the shift that will change the docket problems in the misdemeanor courts is that we need to have felony chiefs come down for a month or 2 months and be the chiefs in the misdemeanor court.
And train everyone?
No, I don't know about it. They'll get trained in the process. I had a felony chief who hadn't been in misdemeanor court in 13 years. She told me she didn't even know that they were still offering pretrial intervention for DWIs in misdemeanor court.
Well, what's happening down there is there's like the judge will say, all right, we'll set it for trial, and I'm looking at the district attorney thinking, you haven't even watched the video, man. Like, you haven't even watched the video.
Yeah.
You haven't even talked to And what lawyer is going to advise their client, hey, look, they don't have the video, they don't have the photos, they don't have the medical records, it's trial day. What lawyer is going to say, you know what, I think you should plead guilty. They don't have any of these key pieces of evidence, so you should just kind of plead guilty. No, you're going to advise the client, they don't have anything, set the thing for trial. I mean, they haven't even gathered what they need to.
But see, the problem is that they are understaffed right now.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So
no, they're not. No. I disagree with that. The problem, I go back to the article that Susan Brown or the quote that she made, or I read that Susan Brown said it right after Harvey. The problem is not the courts. The problem is in DA intake, and she's exactly right. If they're overworked, they need to stop. They need to take half as many people in intake and make the people that are still in intake smarter. Not too smart, because they're getting too smart. They're stretching where they can stretch and make probable cause for an arrest. They're not thinking about, well, can I make this? Are they going to be able to make this when it gets to a trial court? And we need to stop arresting people for criminal trespass when it's just a homeless person. We need to have a place where they can be taken. It'd be a lot less money out of the taxpayers' pockets if they can go somewhere other than the Harris County Jail when they're sleeping on the stoop of a building or something like that. And then the driving while license invalid and license suspended. And not every single person who's not white needs to be arrested in Harris County when their license is suspended when they get pulled over.
But this is a problem that's been going on for years. This isn't unique to the Ogg administration. It was going on in the administrations before that. And so...
But can you imagine, maybe I'm naive, but I believe that if you have somebody come down who for the last decade has been handling only capital murder trials, and they come down to misdemeanor court with the purpose of cleaning house, they're going to go, wait a second. What does y'all call this? DWLI? What is driving while license? Just the I. Oh, invalid. Okay. Sort the docket and show me how many of those we have.
Well, but
everyone where they're not connected to another, they don't have two cases, dismiss every case that's just DWLI. Let DPS deal with their suspended driver's license.
Well, they don't have to arrest them. The option to use the enhancement to make the DWI a DWLI arrestable offense is within their discretion. They can just say Class C. It's Class C. Here's a ticket. Here, we're not going to...
They can tell the officer, sorry, you know what, we're not taking those charges. Just give them a ticket and make sure they don't drive off.
Unless there's something unless there's some sort of extraneous thing that's going to aggravate the case in some way. I mean, wreck or drugs.
I mean, the reality is, at some point, you can't... I understand what you're saying, Justin, but at some point, that is an issue for the legislature to address, not the DAs, because the DAs, their role is to prosecute the laws that are on the books. And
I agree with that.
And at some point, I mean, from a standpoint, and as the elected DA, you can't just say, well, I'm just not going to prosecute driving while license invalid, because I mean, frankly, as a citizen, if I go get my license and I keep my license valid, I don't want a bunch of people driving around and not having to do the same thing I'm doing. I mean, you're going to have a lot of backlash on that, and from a political standpoint, you can't just do that. So the change has to start from the legislature. So I don't begrudge the DA, whoever it is, Democrat, Republican, socialist, libertarian, astronaut. I don't care. If I don't think you can sit there and say we're not going to prosecute DWLIs or we're not going to prosecute trespass. And do it, en masse. I mean, you just, it's not reality. I mean,
then hold on. Let's unpack that, because I don't think maybe I'm wrong, but I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I don't think you disagree with what Kim Ogg's been doing with low-level marijuana cases. And so I agree that the lawful duty of the prosecutor is to enforce the laws as the legislature enacts them,
right,
or passes them and the governor signs them. However, when you're Harris County versus Fort Bend County and your resources are already stretched thin because just of the sheer size of the county, the Harris County District Attorney's law office is the largest law firm in the state of Texas. The jail is the largest provider of mental health services in the state of Texas. There's 10,000 people while we're talking. Any Thursday night, there's 10,000 people that everybody who's listening to this is paying for to be housed in the Harris County Jail. Some of those people need to be there, sure. But I don't know how many of them, it's to the number of 10,000. But even if it is, the DA's office has to prioritize resources if they're limited, and they are limited resources. So they don't get to complain when they don't, at least in my opinion, they don't get to complain when they don't properly, and I guess it's my determination of what's a proper use of your resources. But if you don't properly use your resources, you don't get to complain about being overworked and spread too thin later on.
But I think you're missing the point on the marijuana. That's a political thing. She's opting not to prosecute it for political reasons because She's hoping.
Well, that's not. But she's never once. Come on, Jimmy. I mean, we may think that like cynically on the inside, but that's not what she's putting out there in all the press releases about it.
I don't disagree with you.
I mean, Kim Ogg. She's saying this is about resources. This is about police officer resources.
But I don't disagree with you. But the whole premise of these jurisdictions who are not prosecuting low-level marijuana cases is under the belief that we are going to try and effectuate change to the legislature by not prosecuting these, because it's a legislature issue. I mean, look, I don't necessarily, from a moral standpoint, do I think marijuana should be prosecuted? No. Okay? But it's the law that's on the books. Okay? Now, with DWLI and trespass, that's a different story to me. I mean, I But
then going back to what you said about driving while licensed invalid and sharing the roads with people who are driving on an invalid license, Jimmy, that law being on the books and people being arrested is not stopping that from happening. Never will.
Neither is people driving without insurance. But that's the point. It doesn't make me not want to enforce that law. Because
I'm not saying don't enforce it. I'm just saying we don't need to drag them. We don't need to arrest them, process them into the jail, wait for them to go see a magistrate, get a PR bond for them. If they don't get a PR bond because they 2 years ago or 30 years ago had a violent felony on their record,
I don't disagree with you on that notion.
They're going to get an unsecured bond in 24 hours, and then they're going to have to go to court 7 days later, and then they're going to get a court-appointed attorney, because not very many people who are driving around on a suspended license who have the means to take care of the surcharges that have mounted from that possession of marijuana case that they got 3 years ago that they did a time served for, and they got a license suspension. So you can enforce the law without bringing them down to court, taking them to jail, and then bringing them down to court.
But that's a legislature change. That's a legislature change.
No. JV pointed it out. The legislature's given the police and the district attorney the option of what level offense to give the person. They can still enforce the law without doing what they're doing. They can also, I think, right? Like if they pull somebody over and they're committing any crime that's being committed, they don't have to arrest the person, right? They can cite them, give them their court date, and say, maybe
they could,
not.
But look, we don't live in Mayberry. I mean, the Houston Police Department's not going to just not arrest people and say, yeah, we go on around there. We're not going to give you a citation for that.
You're right, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not expecting the Houston Police Department, the Harris County Sheriff's Office, or even Jersey Village Police Department to change their policies.
We got 30 seconds.
The Harris County District Attorney's Office accepts and denies charges for every single person that gets arrested. It's up to them. The buck stops there. Like Judge Brown said, the problem is not the courts. The problem is in DA intake. Great show, guys. I'll let y'all wrap it up. Bye.
He took like 15 minutes on the phone.
It was good. It was real good. I mean, it would have been better if he was in person. But
why he can't just, come and sit on the show?
Tucker Graves. It's the last show before his final exit. Tucker, HCCLA president, you've been amazing. Thank you for your service. Thank you.
And support of the show.
And
on that note, ladies and gentlemen, that's all the time we have for next week. We'll be off. That's all the time we have for this week. We'll be off next week, but back with you on, the 17th? May 17th?
Yep.
We'll be back for another show. Good night. See you later.